For the musician using UPIC, the system consists principally of this graphics table, these control screens, and these loudspeakers that relay the sound. Thanks to these elements, the user can converse with the system without having to bother about the electronic part behind this wall or the hundreds of programs that run it. Therefore, no technical competence is needed other than his competence as a musician in order to realize his creative gestures, and he can work on his own. The Fiat France Institute de France Foundation presents UPIC, a computer that aids composition through drawing, conceived by Xenakis and realized at the Xenakis.
1954, Xenakis, mathematician and engineer, architect and musician, brings with metastasis a solution to the problems arising from a musical notation that has become too complex for the old system of codification of notes. His graphic score gives you a direct impression of the overall sound effect wanted by the composer, but the players of the day didn't know how to read the graphics. Xenakis had to transcribe it. What a wonderful dream it was to imagine then that one day a machine would be able to translate graphics directly into music. That was more than 30 years ago. The idea of UPIC is born. A lot of patience and tenacity was needed to see this formidable project through. Technological advance was too slow. Many doors were not easy to open. A few fellow travelers, on their own, managed from 1966 on to set up a research center that was to lead to the realization of the first UPIC system. Technology had at last caught up with the dream.
To draw some music, I'm going to take this electromagnetic pen and open, as Bach did, a page of music. As for him, the pitch will run from bottom to top, and time will run from left to right. But I am not limited to a dozen pre-established pitches, as in the tonal system. I can travel right through space, or even create a cluster of sounds that slide, like this. Or a cloud of very short sounds, like this, to which I must then give a tonal color, that is to say, a color that I've already prepared by drawing. Here's one, and here's another. I've been able to draw up to 100 and have stored them in these squares. That's infinitely more than Bach ever had. Now, meanwhile, I shall prepare another curve that is going to represent the variations in the dynamics, the intensity of the sound. Here the sound becomes louder and louder, and here still louder. Now that all these elements have been prepared, I can introduce them into the machine. This sound result can at any time be modified, transformed, or mixed with other pages in order to build up the overall form of the piece. The composer has therefore at his disposal all the elements of his music, from the microstructure inside the sound material to the macro form of a piece lasting several tens of minutes. His is the sole responsibility.
This borrowing from Bach is just a bit of fun. It is used purely for the purposes of demonstration. The object of UPIC is not to imitate traditional instruments, but to produce new sounds for today's music. 1978, UPIC exists. Xenakis realizes, in the Polytope of Messina in Greece, the first work entirely drawn on the machine. UPIC was realized at Xenakis Study Center for Mathematics and Musical Automatics, of which Xenakis is the director. Guy Medig The engineer who conceived the system's programming presents it to the press with its inventor at his side. Since 1978, thanks to the help of the Ministry of Culture and the National Center for the Study of Telecommunications, SEMAMU has developed considerably. The first version of the system was taken its place in history. The third version, which permits real-time listening, has just been born.
Since 1982, a new team has been at work developing a UPIC based on microprocessors. The aim of this project was to produce a smaller system, one that was more transportable, above all more reliable. Our idea was to go beyond the stage of a laboratory prototype and produce a marketable machine. Moreover, newer and faster components have enabled us to speed up the time taken for the calculations, and the end result has been the so-called real-time system.
1987. UPIC can be used by one and all. Several dozens of composers have already realized a piece on UPIC. Each is different. The possibilities of the system are so vast that all musical styles can be generated.
What interests me in UPIC is not that it is just a synthesizer, it's also an instrument for analysis. It's rather like an electronic microscope. You can look at it, at the realities of acoustics in very, very fine detail, and so discover quite unsuspected details right in the natural sounds, in the acoustic sounds. So what can be done with these sounds? Well, I extract forms and sounds which I can take as models, and I put them together to create new types. It's a bit like genetic engineering, if you like. I produce chimeras, hybrids, and then I try to give them life. Not all hybrids are fruitful, not all are viable. UPIC interests me because one can dialogue with a machine by drawing. For me, what is important was to work with very clear graphics, so that the result could be known even before the music was played on the machine. Even then, there's the orchestral aspect. That is to say, one can play a single sound, but one can also play 100 or 200 at the same time. That is why I wanted to play on this aspect of masses, whereby starting with a single sound, little by little one makes proliferate in order to create cyclic forms, proliferative forms, which continually get bigger, then very gradually reduce to a single sound. That is why the graphism you can see in the score are clustered forms, in which we have respiratory forms, wherein we start from silence and return to silence, having an enormous, immense sound.
UPIC is also an irreplaceable tool for teaching. Its ease of application enables children, even very young children, to enter the contemporary sound world by means of a truly creative approach. There is no prefabricated music in UPIC. In this respect, it is very different from the synthesizers on the market. Everything depends on the hand that draws. The user must invent everything, must construct everything. If he has talent, the result will be interesting. If no musicality is present, it won't work. Instrumentalists, instrument makers, musicologists, but also physicists and mathematicians will find in the system a host of possibilities for experimental application. Les ateliers UPIC have been set up to make the machine available from composers and for the general public. Situated in the Parc of the Villette in Paris, they organize classes, workshops, public demonstrations, concerts, and they have regularly been invited by festivals and cultural centers all over the world to give presentations of the system.
So what of UPIC's future? First, the multiplying of UPIC by industrialization. Next, the transference of UPIC to PCs, like, for example, the IBM AT. Then there is the improvement of UPIC's ergonomy. Then the adding of functions to transform the graphics with functions for complex numbers, orthodox or algebraic functions, transformations, with, for example, deterministic or probability functions. For instance, automated cells at all levels, including that of sampling. A camera could be added to register the drawings, including color, and all this so that UPIC can be made available to the entire population of the globe, so that man can realize his supreme capacity for abstraction, for therein lies the most interesting of his capabilities.
Son pouvoir le plus intéressant.